There we go. And I'm
Oh,
going to
you need
make
to
it back to
record.
you right
Good
now.
call.
Yes.
Cool. Realtor, nice.
All
Coaching,
right.
mental wellness, wallet, financial literacy. Very cool. Awesome. Like it. Tan on the run. Cool. Creative agency. Love it. Awesome. Sweet. We're going to have some fun. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that you folks can take out of this session. Really looking forward to diving in. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is content marketing. I am a geek and grew up on the internet. I sleep and dream in pixels. So this is the stuff that I really do geek out about all the time. In the chat, again, I'm going to have one more request. Just give me a quick yes, just write yes if you can see my screen, and at the same time, you can still see me. If so, amazing. That would be great to know. Perfect. I'm seeing some yeses, so perfect. We're going to jump in. So as we jump in, I am going to take you back into time. I'm going to take you back into a time when I was a young little whippersnapper. My hair was probably, I don't know, maybe a lot of inches longer than it is now. This is my COVID look, but it's a remnants of kind of my childhood because I had braids. I was a cornrows guy, loved them. And I never thought that I would ever get my hair back to be long again. And then COVID happened and it was a mini treat to kind of flex this new look, and I'm digging it. So it's going to stick around for a bit. But also at that time, I was obsessed with Mulan. I was obsessed with Hercules. I was obsessed with the 101 Dalmatians, and I was completely obsessed with every single Toy Story film that ever was produced. I was a huge Disney geek. I loved every film that Disney ever produced. As an adult, I have two little ones. One is only a month and a half old, so she hasn't gone to Disneyland yet. But the 2-year-old, just like me, obsessed with Minnie Mouse. Me and her watch Minnie Mouse's Boutique every morning, and it is an amazing thing. But I can remember as a kid sitting really close to the TV and my mom saying to me, son, your eyes are going to go bad. You can't be that close to the TV. And my dad would come down and say, Ross, listen to your mom. You have to get away from the TV screen. Your eyes are going to go bad if you stay that close. And it turns out, like, as a living right now, even you are probably very, very close to your screen. We have these screens so close to our face. We have VR headsets on our eyes where we pretty much have the pixels on top of our eyelids. So my mom lied to me completely for all those years about if you sit too close to the screen that you're going to lose your eyes. And at Christmas time last year, she was over and she had her iPad and she was swiping through. And I was like, Mom, you're pretty close to that screen. And she gave me that look that only a mom could give you. And I was like, I'll chill a bit. But my point is, we have gone to a point where as much as that feels like it's behind us, it is really in front of us, right? Like the content that we consume on a regular basis today is at an all-time high in terms of the quality, right? And that is because we're living in a time where right now, I guarantee you, probably all of you are within an arm's reach of two devices, probably the computer in which you're consuming this on, as well as the mobile device. Because of that, there's more content being created. Because of that, more people are empowered to actually create content. You can take your camera from your phone and you can create a movie, you can take photos, you can go on live, you can do all kinds of things. And this has empowered an entire creative movement where people can now create amazing stories and tell amazing get amazing messages out there to the masses and really have an impact on a global scale. And this is not just a good thing as a creator, but it's also a bad thing in the sense that this is what you're competing against, right? You are competing with all of the data, all of the information that is being published every single day. And there's a lot of it. Every single day, there's more people sending out tweets, more people going on Instagram, more people sharing content on LinkedIn, more brands creating YouTube videos. And with all of that, you are competing with the data, the content, the stories, the messages, the tweets, the TikToks, etc. You're competing with all of that. And if you were able to actually take all of that content, I'm going to take you back into time again to the time of DVDs. If you were to take all of that content and upload them to DVDs, you could get to the moon 23 times or circle the earth 222 times. That's how much data is being created. That's how much data is being created by us as humans and us as creators. So when we think about the stories that we want to get out there to the world, we have to acknowledge and recognize that we are competing against all of that information. And it's becoming more and more important that we understand not only the fundamental elements that are going to result in creating a story and creating pieces of content that will resonate with people on a human level, but also how we can be effective at distributing those stories into the channels and onto the communities where our audience is spending time. And my hope on this webinar is to really show you and share with you some insights so you can too take the content that you're creating, the content that you're putting out there, and better understand not only whether or not you should press publish on a piece of content and how to do that well, but also how you can distribute that content into the channels that your audience is spending time on. So one of my favorite examples, I'll go back to that Disney idea again, is Disney. And what Disney has done with their content creation process, as well as their content distribution process, is something that I think no matter how big or small your business is, no matter how big or small your ambitions are, you can take a lot of inspiration from the way that Disney creates content, because Disney has successfully shaped culture by creating amazing assets that have influenced lives, that influence the way that we view the world, and has done an amazing job at connecting with people for decades to come. When you think about the movies that Disney has created, they have lasted decades. They have lasted generations. My mom grew up watching Disney. I grew up watching Disney, and now my little ones will grow up watching Disney. But a lot of the stories are essentially the same, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later on around the Disney model and how they do this. But if you look at even the top movies in 2019, consistently Disney is showing up at the top of the box office. And there's a few things that they understand that I think you can take inspiration from, which fundamentally comes back to the diagram that Walt Disney himself created back in like 1943 or something like that, or I think it was actually before then, around the Disney creation model. And the Disney creation model is exactly what you're looking at here, where it starts with Walt. And what Walt is not just Walt, the individual human, but it's the idea. And every single Disney movie is meant to have a certain idea. It's supposed to have a positive spin. It's supposed to take you through a certain type of story arc. It's supposed to have certain elements, etc. And when you have that, you have every single Disney movie that has ever been created. When you have that at the start of your beginning of your creation process, that then gets passed down into things like story sketches, your writers, your story development process, character models, etc. In your business, you might be thinking, what in the world does Walt have to do with me? The Walt of your world is your brand vision. It's your message. It's the people who you're trying to connect with. So when you're thinking about the content that you put out there, you want to put the customer first, and you want to think about what are the values, what are the message, what are the things that are going to resonate with these people. And that's going to act as the starting point for every story that you tell. When you think of some of the most successful brands like Apple, they all have a certain feeling with every ad that they publish. Most recently, Nike, when you look at every ad that they publish, they all have a certain feeling. So for you, I want you to take a step back and think about what is the feeling, what is the message, what is the core essence that we want our story to feel like and sound like, and then you inject that into every single piece that you create. That is going to be your Walt. And when you then pass that down to a story, you're going to start to then take it into the real fundamental efforts and elements that create a single asset. In the world of Disney, that's going to include things like animation and ink and paint, and then the direction. So you have the directors, you start to identify who's the right music talent that's going to be a part of this, who's going to be the right camera crew, etc. And of course, along the way, there's going to be a lot of different moving parts, ranging from new talent to budgets and traffic. You need police, etc. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, but fundamentally, what you do is you start with that story, you start with the understanding of what it is that your message is. You then get it into the production efforts, and then you send it off to the lab. And the lab is essentially that final spot where it goes through a review where you are determining whether or not this is staying true to your brand, staying true to the story that you want to put out there. And it's also determining whether or not all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. So that's that final edit stage. And then once it's complete, once you can say this is a piece of content that is correct, this is great, this is ready to go, it goes into what Disney calls Walt Disney Presents. And we'll talk about that later, but that's essentially the distribution engine that goes into your content. So let me make this a little bit more simple for you. So when it comes down to it, it starts with an idea, right? Like every single piece of content that you create starts with an idea, whether it's a series of Instagram stories, whether it's your own webinars, whether it's a blog post, whether it's an ebook, whether it's a Instagram post for your feed. It starts with an idea. And then that idea turns into a framework, which is just a rough sketch of, okay, this is where we're going to go with it. Then you get into that first draft, then you get into the final draft. And then finally, when you go to that lab section and you're about to press publish on a piece of content, it goes into that public piece of content. That's the process. That's the approach that you typically will take with piece of content. And it is the exact same approach that Disney takes when they create content as well, except it's a little bit more modernized for the way that we're creating content online on social media. Folks, when you are thinking about content, you have to remember it is very important. It is fundamental that you take the idea of creating content seriously, because at the end of the day, content is truly the foundation of culture. And what I mean by this is when you think about your own beliefs, when you think about the stories that you tell, when you think about the things that you interact with on a regular basis, all of those beliefs and all of those feelings, all of those ideas are shaped by content. It's the content that you consume on a regular basis, whether it's books that you read, whether it's the stories that we were told by our parents, the stories that we were told by teachers, by elders in the community, by people around us in the office, etc., the tweets that we follow, the influencers we follow on Instagram. All of that content influences our perception, influences the way that we view the world and our own belief system. And because it is so important that you can actually impact someone that way, you have to take every single piece of content that you create seriously, because you do fundamentally have the ability to shape the way that somebody views the world. And that's a very powerful thing. So when you recognize that, you can start to lean into your own power a little bit around the fact that every single piece of content that you create has the ability to influence other people. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. And I don't want it to seem intimidating in any way to recognize that. But whether you're educating someone on a new home listing, if you're in the world of real estate, whether you're letting someone know about a new yoga class that you're running, whether you're letting someone know about a new wellness program that you're offering, whatever it may be, the pieces of content that you create should influence the way that somebody perceives that situation. Now, we have gone through over the last few months one of the most wild times to be alive. I graduated in 2008 during the first recession, or it wasn't the first recession of my lifetime. And when it happened, I was like, okay, this is fine. I'm still in my late teens. I'm good. I'll figure this thing out. But it was wild. It was a wild time. I remember going to Philly and seeing all the banks getting raided and shut down. It was chaotic. But at that moment, there was this website called Google, and people were still going to Google looking for topics, looking for information. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because during COVID-19, a lot of people stopped creating content. And people today, even still, are starting to kind of now realize that they should have kept creating content. But a lot of people scaled back on their budgets. During the 2008 recession, a lot of people said, I'm not going to create content. I'm not going to invest in advertising. I'm not going to invest in marketing. But if you did maintain the creation process, if you were creating content about things like social media marketing or software as a service, even amidst a recession, the amount of people looking for content went up and to the right. Why? Because people fundamentally want information. We as humans seek out information. So if you as a marketer, as a creator, as a brand, as a CEO, as a president can empower your team and create a culture, even internally, that recognizes the value of creating things and getting stories out there to the world, then you will be able to ride any wave that happens because you have put content out there that will resonate with people when they are looking for information on your solution and on your topic. This is why I say content is the foundation of culture, because again, even amidst chaos, people are looking for content. When you look at entertainment content, like the entertainment industry has gone up and to the right as well over the last few months, because people are looking for entertainment. People are looking for more information that they can consume. And if you can create that content, it is a great way to connect with people. So how can you create? So let's dive back into the world of Disney a little bit. I want you to recognize that if you are new in your journey of content creation and you write your first piece of content, do not get all caught up in being pixel perfect, right? Like the first sketches associated with Star Wars did not look like Chewbacca. Like, look at Chewbacca. It was horrible. They were not amazing sketches. They weren't amazing drawings, but you iterate over time and you eventually get to something great and you get to something amazing. So when you start to write that first draft, be okay with that ugly draft. Be okay with not creating something that is pixel perfect the first time around, because with practice, with time, you will be able to create something special. I remember the first time when I wrote a blog post, I created this piece of content, press publish. I thought it was going to light the marketing world on fire. I got 2 likes. One was from my mom and one was from my friend Justin. Showed it to Justin. He gave me a like on Facebook for this piece, but I didn't understand back then how to create content. I didn't understand how to distribute content. but you can learn the craft by constantly doing it. And the more you do it, the more you're going to learn. And that is the key. You have to start somewhere and be okay with the idea that at first it might not be pretty. So some of you, though, have already created content in the past. And for you, I have a simple piece of advice, and it is this. You want to optimize your content portfolio. And I intentionally say portfolio because I think fundamentally, for some reason, we don't view content that we create as assets, just like we do our financial efforts, right? Like we should view every single piece of content that we create as an asset, just like the assets that we invest in. If you have a financial portfolio, you have a little bit of stocks, you have a little bit of bonds, you have a little bit of crypto, whatever it may be that's making up your financial portfolio, you have a little bit of these different things and they're diversified. With your content portfolio, it should also be a bit diversified. A few blog posts, a few Instagram posts, a few stories, a few tweets, a few LinkedIn updates, etc. You want to diversify your content portfolio. And when you have that, you have to revisit it and you have to optimize it based on your own goals. And I always rely on this idea of the 4 R's, which is this concept of remixing, revising, removing, and redirecting. What does that mean? It means you want to remix your content, meaning take old content that you have created. Don't be afraid to adjust it for different platforms. You want to revise your content. So if something gets old, you want to update it. You want to remove your content. If a piece of content isn't serving you, then get it out of your life. You don't need it anymore. Or redirect your content. And this is more on the technical side, but from a URL lens, if a piece of content is ranking in Google or isn't ranking in Google, you can redirect that to a piece of content that is. Let's talk about how this is Disney's strategy. So if you look at, again, in 2019, some of the best movies that Disney published and some of the movies that generated all the buzz, what were they? They were remakes. Dumbo, Lion King, Aladdin, Toy Story. Sounds like a 90s kid's dream. And it also sounds like a kid who was born in 2018's dream, because apparently they brought these movies back to life for them just the same, except Nala turned into Beyonce and they brought in Childish Gambino to play Simba. Like a whole new world was brought to life, but it wasn't really a whole new world. It's a world that we already seen back in the 90s. This is a remix, right? You take old content that has clear market fit, like it's working, it resonated with a group of people. And if you can take that same idea and you bring it to life again, but with a slight twist, modern technology or a modern spin, then people will still resonate with it. Why? Because people at their core are still the same, right? These same fundamental stories that resonate with somebody today are the same fundamental stories that resonated with somebody in 1990, that resonated with somebody in 1930, that resonated with somebody in 1842. The same fundamental stories still resonate with people. So when you understand that, you can look at your content and stop having a bit of shame around this idea of, I wrote that piece of content in 2016. I can't promote it today. Yes, you can. If it resonated with people back then, make a few adjustments, make a few tweets, and then promote that thing and get it out there to the world. There's a reason, folks, though, that nobody remembers Lion King 1.5. Like if you are a Lion King fan and you remember 1.5, then my hat's off to you. You've got a great memory, but no one else remembers it the same way nobody remembers Brother Bear 2 or Tarzan and Jane. No one remembers all of these movies. Mulan 2, no, never saw it. Cinderella 3, definitely not, right? Like nobody remembers these because Disney stopped investing in these assets. And similarly, if you press publish on a piece of content, you go live on a story and you put something out there and it doesn't resonate with folks, don't be afraid to never promote that piece of content again. You don't need to kind of go all in on a piece of content that doesn't work. If it doesn't resonate with folks, press publish, hear how the community responds to it, and then don't be afraid to walk away from it. Similarly, there's actually SEO benefits to this. So if you have this content on your website, there are tons of studies that show if you actually delete some of that content off your site, it's going to increase your actual ability to rank in Google. So that's a pro tip that I would also advise you keep in mind. Now, I also want to remind you, this is something that a lot of people don't know, and it blew my mind a few years ago when I realized it. What is Lion King? Lion King is essentially Hamlet remixed with some lions thrown in the mix and the African safari. That's it. Lion King is Hamlet, but remixed. And with that, provides another insight into how you should be thinking about your content. Don't be afraid to remix ideas from different industries, different times, different eras even, and apply your own story. Remember, we talked about your Walt? Apply your Walt to a story or an essence that resonated with a different group, with a different space in a different time. I call this my Sherlock Homeboy approach, which is essentially this idea of going deep into the archives to find stories and messages and content and angles that resonated with people back in 1992 that can have a modern spin associated with them. You revisit those stories, you bring them to life, and you bring it to your market and you bring it to your audience, and you watch and see how your audience are, again, just people, and people will resonate with the same stories that people like them resonated with in the past. So leveraging the past to inspire your future is a massive opportunity. You just need to be willing to embrace the whole concept of a remix. Now, here's a tool that you can use to also get inspiration around what you can leverage to kind of go back into time and see how they grew and how they were able to develop something. The Wayback Time Machine. So my space, the world that I live in primarily is in software. So I love studying the ways that software companies went from having 5 people working at them to billions of dollars like Salesforce and HubSpot. How do I go about kind of reverse engineering their success? I use this site called Wayback Time Machine. You plug in their URL and it will show you what their website looked like back in 2002. It will show you what their website looked like in 1998. And when you go back and you start to see, okay, so what were they prioritizing? What were the things that they were doing that allowed them to kind of resonate with folks and really become successful? Simple things like having testimonials on their site, simple things like having a blog section on their homepage, etc. And you can use this for inspiration around the things that you should do in your growth trajectory and with your plans around how you want to develop yourself. If you're someone who's in the world of like, I want to be an influencer, I want to create courses, etc., you're going to take sites like Marie Forleo, you're going to plug them into Wayback Time Machine. You're going to look at Amy Porterfield, plug her site into Wayback Time Machine and see where they started, where they began, to understand what they were creating in the early days, because it's easy to get caught up in this idea of looking at folks when they have made it and saying, I need to do it just like that. Not realizing that when they made it, they now have a team of 50 people behind them. And if you only have a team of 5 or 1, there's no reason to kind of try and take on all of the various channels, to take on all of the different efforts, right? You want to start small and get an understanding of how they started to generate traction early on. So Wayback Time Machine is key for doing that. I would advise you to try to think about who are the companies, who are the people who set the standard of excellence in marketing in your space. And of course, you're going to aspire to be like them. You're going to aspire to take inspiration from them. You are going to aspire to get to that level eventually. But in doing so, you also have to recognize that you should only take on as much as you can actually bear and as much as you can actually capitalize on. So I want to take you into the tactics a little bit around how this works. So for me, SEO is the space that I live in. SEO, search engine optimization, the idea of getting traffic from Google and having people show up on your site. One of the ways that you can rank in Google is to have people link to your site. So me running a marketing company, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what content in the world of marketing generates the most backlinks. Because if I can get more backlinks to my site, it means that Google's going to think I'm more credible, and Google's going to raise my site up in the ranks on their search engine results page when somebody types in marketing content, etc. So what did I do? I took some of the top marketing blogs in the world and I created a list and I analyzed how many of them were generating backlinks. And I wanted to see how many of these pages were generating thousands of backlinks and what type of content were they. And by doing so, I was able to start to identify a few trends. I was able to identify that tools, so when people and brands created free tools, they generated a ton of backlinks. If people wrote definitions, so if somebody created a definition for what is a backlink, that content generated lots of backlinks, ironic enough. If people created content like the 20 stats that show why Instagram is going to stick around, that type of content generated lots of backlinks. If people created research pieces of content where they were doing their own proprietary research, that content generated a lot of backlinks. And from this, I was able to get an insight into, okay, this is the type of content that journalists are linking to. This is the type of content that media publications are linking to, that other marketing companies are linking to. So if I can create this content too, I will get the backlinks. So I looked at it. I was like, all right, definitions, stats, research, collections, tools. I'm not going there. You have to build a bunch of things. I'm not an engineer. I can write content, but I'm not going to try to build a tool. So I started to write definitions and I started to create stat posts. So stat posts in particular are essentially articles like this, where you write 48 eye-opening LinkedIn stats for B2B marketers, 31 jaw-dropping Reddit stats for marketers, etc. Within months, we were able to generate 600 links to the LinkedIn post, 28 to the Reddit post, and these numbers are just continuously rising. For a day, if you actually just went to Google and typed in LinkedIn, our article showed up above the LinkedIn website, which was wild. We got a whole bunch of traffic and people started reaching out saying, I can't find the login button to LinkedIn. And I was like, okay, you folks do not understand the internet. And that traffic didn't really provide us with value, but the backlinks did. And that was our goal. We wanted backlinks. So by creating these pieces of content, using the Sherlock Homeboy approach of reverse engineering the success that other people had, we were able to rank #1 for a day for LinkedIn. And now we're ranking for a handful of these different pieces, as well as a handful of others. So another place that you should use the Sherlock Homeboy approach is YouTube. I love it. It's one of my favorite places to go to get content inspiration. Go to YouTube. Let's say you're running a gardening site. Let's say that that's what you've created. You are trying to raise your awareness. I know we're going into the winter in Canada. You're not going to be running a garden anytime soon, but if you were in the summer, you had a great time to do it. Let's say you wanted to create a YouTube channel about gardening and you were thinking, okay, I'm going to create a video about easy basil propagation. You look at this, it's got 350,000 views. That's awesome, right? Like that's an interesting insight. So you look at that, you see propagating basil has 350,000 views. You think, I'm going to write an article about this. I'm going to create content about this. Turns out though, if you type in propagating, there's a whole bunch of videos just like this, just about propagating other plants, propagating succulents, propagating plants, propagating roses. So what does that mean? It means that you dive deeper. You again, use that Sherlock Homeboy approach where you start to get really, really curious and you start to just typing in propagating and see what shows up. And it'll turn out that Google and YouTube will actually start making recos for you, where they'll start telling you, oh, propagating lavender from clippings. So what does that mean? It means maybe you create a piece of content about propagating lavender from cuttings or laurel. I don't even know what that is, but like maybe I'll create a piece of content about propagating a laurel hedge or a large monstera. Like all of these things are content inspiration ideas because clearly people want them. Otherwise, YouTube wouldn't be showing and giving you recommendations that this is content that people want. Further, you start to go in deeper and you can see, okay, when I type in propagating lavender from cuttings, you can start to see, all right, the how to grow lavender cuttings has 177,000 views. Grow lavender from cuttings has 93,000 views. And this one has 185,000 views. When I see this as a creator, I'm just drooling with the opportunity because I'm seeing, okay, this clearly is fulfilling a need. People are going to the internet looking for information on lavender cuttings. If in my business, I deliver or sell succulents or I provide gardening tips, or if I sell hedge trimmers or whatever that may be, I'm going to create a piece of content about this and I'm going to try to be better than whatever is showing up currently in YouTube. That's going to be the goal, and that's what you're going to try to accomplish. Another thing that I advise folks do when it comes to that Sherlock Homeboy approach is don't be afraid to go into the sitemap of some of your favorite sites and see what else they're doing. Like see how they've structured their site and use that for inspiration as well. Another thing that you want to do is you want to actually reverse engineer what shows up in Google when you type in words that are relevant to your space. So I know someone mentioned that they're a real estate agent. So for me, if I'm a real estate agent, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in real estate agent in Oshawa, real estate agent in Calgary, whatever that may be. And I'm going to see what shows up. And I'm going to then try to actually identify what are the similarities between these links that are showing up. Is every single link that's showing up a list of a bunch of realtors? Is one of them a directory? Is one of them a sales page, like an actual website for a realtor? If so, I'm going to look at that and try to study and figure out how can I be just as good as them? How can I remix this idea to create something for myself and for my own brand? If I'm noticing that there's a bunch of lists that are showing up, guess what I'm doing? I'm reaching out to every single person who owns these lists, and I'm going to ask them if they can feature me as well. So that's the thinking. That's the approach that you want to apply when you're using that reverse engineering Sherlock Homeboy approach to your content and creation. Again, remember, the new Lion King is also just the Lion King revised. So when you look at 2019, they come out with this new Lion King. It's essentially a revision of the old one in 1994. Same story, same message, just up-to-date technology. If any of you are in the wonderful world of YouTube, I strongly recommend that you leverage, if you have not heard of it before, but the date trick. And what is the date trick? You upload a YouTube video once. let's say November 28th in 2018. Then when 2020 comes around, you update the title of your video to just say 2020. And what happens is, due to the YouTube algorithm that is very specifically favoring whatever date it is now, you're going to start seeing that video start to show up. So guess what this person's going to do? In December, they're going to upload this video and they're going to change it to Tesla strategy in 2021, the comprehensive overview. But the content within the video was actually created in November 2018. So if you want to be better than this guy, better than this gal, whoever created the video, what you want to do is you then want to update with actual new content, because Google is getting smart. They can actually do a transcription of your voice on video now, and they can see whether or not you're saying 2018 or 2020. But that's a pro tip. You definitely want to update your dates in YouTube if you haven't been doing that already. Now, here's another thing that I think is very important that you understand, and is something to be very aware of and somewhat fearful of. And that is the fact that today, Google is starting to show signs that they're actually taking information from other websites and they're placing it right in the search engine results page. Back in the day, you go to Google, you type in coronavirus cases, you're probably going to end up on the government website and you're going to be met with the results, and that's a visit for the government. The government gets a visit to their website. They feel like they're serving the public, etc. Or you type in the best books to read if you are trying to kind of get into marketing. Today, what's going to happen? Google is actually going to show you a bunch of books directly in the search engine results page. You're not going to go to a blog that Ross wrote in 1992 about that topic. You're going to just be met with the answers right in Google. Why is this important? It's important because Google is no longer being a destination that sends people traffic. It's starting to be a destination in its own right. And what that means is Google is scraping websites and they're placing the information on the search engine results page. Let's dive into that a little bit further. They're taking information from sites like Wikipedia and they're placing the data right here, which means nobody is going to Wikipedia to get the answers to this question. They get the answer here and then they go on about their day and they go back to a social network, they go back to their email, etc. That is the new experience happening on Google. So site pages that exist on Wikipedia today, like the history of gardening, are losing tons and tons of traffic because they were built not for the modern era. This piece was, this entire directory in particular was probably created in 2012. So it's got tons of great content. Don't get me wrong, amazing pieces of content, but Google is just going to scrape that content and make it show up directly in the search engine results page. What does that mean to you? It means that you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to take a similar approach to Disney and take old content and revise it and turn it into something new. So if you're in the gardening world, you're going to take all of this information. You're going to say, okay, Wikipedia has laid out for me exactly what the most important topics are for gardening. This is my table of contents. Now I have to create content like this and turn it into something that is easy to read, just like this. So there's a site that talks about all the different human biases that we have. They took Wikipedia and they turned it into essentially a very beautiful website. Within days, they were able to generate thousands of visits, thousands of people signing up for their product, generating tons of emails, etc. In 48 hours, they had 2,000 new subscribers for their email list. And this is all because they took old, ugly content from Wikipedia and they modernized it. And you can do the exact same thing depending on your niche and depending on your space. Now, you might be thinking, Ross, that's a lot. You've flown through a lot of content. What in the world do you do next? I've got even more. So let's say you have the publication created. You've just launched Aladdin. You've just launched 101 Dalmatians, Beauty and the Beast, whatever piece of content you've created. Let's say you're creating pieces of content like 10 things that you need to know going into 2021 to live your best life. Let's say you're creating a piece of content like 5 of the most impressive neighborhoods for you to consider moving to in Toronto in 2021, whatever it may be. You've created these pieces of content. What do you do next with them? You've created YouTube videos. You've created some tweets, some LinkedIn posts. You now have to focus on distributing them. Disney has a distribution model that I also think you can emulate, a distribution model that you should also be thinking. For years, content gurus have preached at the top of their lungs, you need to create content. Content is king. Just create content and the world will be yours. In reality, what they've forgotten is that if everybody listens to them and if everybody is creating content, then it's just going to be very noisy. So how do you stand out? You stand out by actually distributing that content. So we've gone from a place of cream, which again, showed it to Wu-Tang, but its content rules everything around me, to this idea of dream, which is distribution rules everything around me. That's the belief that I have, which is that you need to invest in having distribution channels to spread that content. If you're building a strategy and product and distribution isn't baked into the content that you're creating, if you aren't spending time thinking about how you can spread your story, you are making a huge mistake. You have to think about, once I press publish, that's not the end of the life cycle for your content. You now have to spread that story. You now have to find ways to get that story in front of an audience. And my hope is in this section to just share with you some of those ideas and how you can do it. So reshare, repost, remix. That's the model that I believe you can apply to distribute your content effectively. What does that mean? So resharing a piece of content that you create back in July of 2019 doesn't mean that it ends on July 25th, 2019. You promote that content again in October and in December and in 2021 as well. I think a lot of people make the mistake of sharing a piece of content once and never sharing it again. You don't want to do that. You want to reshare your content. If you've invested time and energy into an asset, that asset should work for you. And if you want to get dividends out of your asset, that's just like a financial investment, you have to leverage it. And you leverage it by promoting that piece of content. That post you created 2 weeks ago that you forgot about, keep promoting it. Promote it today, promote it tomorrow, promote it tonight. Go on your Instagram live in 2 hours and say, hey folks, just in case you forgot, I wrote a piece about this topic last week and I want you to check it out. I think you'll love it. You want to reshare content that you've created. Just because time has passed doesn't mean that the content is less valuable. The content that you are not promoting has a possibility and an opportunity to influence other people. So create and distribute your content. I always say, create once, distribute forever. That is the model, and that is the approach you want to take to your content. You do not want to just sit on content and let it connect and kind of let it die out. When you are aggressively promoting your content, it's not a bad thing, right? Like at the end of the day, a lot of people will say, yeah, but Ross, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person always promoting my work. I don't want people to think that I'm too promotional. Well, folks, guess what? If somebody unfollows you because you promoted your own work, they weren't going to come and run and pay your mortgage anyway. So what harm does it do? Not much, right? The haters won't pay your bills. So just promote your content, promote your work, promote the work that you're creating. And at the end of the day, the people who stay following you are the people who you want to stay connected with. Have no shame in your game as it relates to promoting your work and promoting your content. You're doing a disservice when you actually just sit back on the content that you've created and you don't promote it. And what I mean by that is, if you've created valuable content that could help a potential client or somebody who needs your services, and they are scrolling through their Instagram feed or their Twitter feed or their Facebook feed, and they do not see your content because you didn't want to promote it, you're doing them a disservice because you didn't get out of your own way to help them. Your clients right now are probably sitting at home scrolling through their feed, consuming content that isn't going to help them improve because you didn't take the step to promote something that probably could help them along the way. So with that, you have to promote your content. Another thing that you should consider is that across the web, there's a lot of communities. And in these communities, you will find your target audience. There's Facebook groups, there's subreddits, there's Slack communities, there's communities like City Moguls, etc. Like there's all these different spaces where people with a similar mindset are spending time. If the people that you are trying to connect with are in a certain community, share your content in that community. Again, I talked about it earlier. My community is the SaaS world. It's the technology founders. So I go to communities like Hacker News and I submit my content. And the hope is that people will resonate with it. People will engage with it. And we've generated millions of dollars in revenue off of the back of this strategy. You can do the exact same thing if you know where your audience is. For example, if you are trying to sell to dentists, you go to Facebook, you type in dentists into search, you then click groups, and you're going to find groups that are probably dentists in your location, in your area where they're spending time. You join those groups, you add value, and they will extract value back and give you value as a result of adding value to their community. Another thing that you want to consider is remixing content. What does that mean? It means if you've created a piece of content that resonated in the past with a certain angle, with a certain lens, don't be afraid to use that again in the future. I shared with you a tweet in a couple slides back about the unbundling of Excel. That piece of content generated tons of leads, tons of buzz on social media. And it was an insight. It was this insight that people want content about the unbundling of big software companies. So what did I do? Just like Disney took old concepts and they applied new ideas to them. I said the unbundling of Excel worked with people. I wonder if the unbundling of G Suite will work with people. Turns out it did. It resonated with folks. Tons of people started to share it. We ended up getting 2 clients out of this piece alone. And it was all based on the insight that a year ago, when we created the unbundling of Excel, it had a lot of success. So let's do it again with the unbundling of G Suite. What does my content calendar look like in 2021? Pro tip, I'll probably create a piece called the unbundling of LinkedIn, the unbundling of Yelp, the unbundling of something else, because these types of content are resonating with people. So if we can create content just like it, again, we're leveraging the Disney model of remixing content and then promoting it over and over again, because we're not too humble to say, all right, it's okay to promote your own work. If you are interested in getting a whole bunch more of these distribution ideas from Twitter posts, Twitter storms, Pinterest, email, Instagram stories, etc., I do have an entire spreadsheet that I put together. If you text me distro sheet to this number, you can get it for free. It's a free treat. You can download it and you can use this spreadsheet yourself. If you upload an RSS feed, we'll actually allow you to populate this content. But it's a free spreadsheet that just shows you, I think there's 101 different ways that you can spread your content. I would have jam-packed this with just distribution tips and techniques, but I'm not going to go into that. So text me distro sheet to this number and I will send you a text back with a spreadsheet link so you can access it. So again, folks, embrace your inner Sherlock homeboy. You also want to look at what your competitors are doing. So you're going to type in what your competitors are doing on sites like SimilarWeb, and you start to look at, okay, it looks like this site, investopedia.com, let's say I'm a financial advisor or something, is generating 2% of their traffic from Medium. That's not significant, but it's probably a good chunk of visitors. I'm now going to look at how can I leverage this site called medium.com. Once I get there, I'm going to realize, okay, with Medium, what I can do is I can take old content that I've published and republish it on medium.com. If you're not familiar with Medium, it's a blog hosting website where you can take blog posts or write blog posts, press publish, and you can get them out to the masses. Tons of popular media sites were built on the back of this platform, and I strongly advise you consider using it as a place to take old content that you've created and republishing it. Why? For example, we took this piece that, again, we wrote like 2 years ago. We republished it on medium.com, same content after it lived on our site, and it generated 23,000 views, and it got tons of engagement from people who were interested in the post that we created originally on our own site. Didn't generate as much traction as it did on medium.com, but by guest posting or essentially submitting it onto this site, we were able to get more traction. Another tip, we talked about this before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in it, but go into these communities, whether it's on Reddit or whether it's in a Facebook group. If I created some of those gardening tip pieces that I talked about, I would join every single gardening group on Facebook. And when I wrote it, I would go into each of them and I would say, hey folks, I love this group so much. I created a piece of content that I think you're going to love. Check out the link below and let me know if you have any questions or thoughts. I would love to hear if you think the way that I'm propagating basil makes sense. You put that content in these communities and there are already folks who are looking for gardening tips for beginners. You know that this is where your audience is spending time. That's what you want to do. If you are looking for a tip again on how to leverage Medium, there's 3 dots at the top of your profile that allow you to add content to a publication. What's a publication? A publication is a third-party blog, so you can contribute to another blog that already exists on medium.com and get your content even more reach. Again, this is a screenshot that just shows you how much traction and engagement we were able to get off of this. It's one of the most underrated techniques that I think exists from a blog standpoint, so definitely don't be afraid to use it. Now, I want to take you into my world a little bit. So rawsimmonds.com is my site that I create content about marketing. It's where I started my career. Blog posts like this, where I talk about what more marketers need to know about Reddit, don't live and die on rawsimmonds.com. I then republish them on LinkedIn, and I then create a YouTube video about them. The key to having successful content is to recognize that the people who follow you today are not the same people that followed you 2 years ago. So if you are remixing old content and turning it into something new, people will resonate with that content because there's new people following you. So don't be afraid to do that. I also want to advise that you embrace experimentation. All of this is an experiment. All of life is an experiment. The more we experiment, the more we tinker, the more fun that you'll make your career and your life. So don't be afraid to do that as well. Now, you might be thinking, bro, you just went through so much. Where do I start? What in the world am I supposed to do with all this insight around content creation, content distribution? You're almost going over your time, Ross. Get off of my screen. I don't want to hear from you anymore. This is overload. I hear you. I feel you. I get it. Just remember this. Remember that nobody remembers Lion King 1.5. When you jump into this, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to press publish on a piece of content that doesn't generate a lot of traction. It is okay to once in a while stumble along the way. The key is just to start, right? The key is just to start. And if you do that, you are well ahead of the vast majority of people, because most people don't realize the power that comes with content creation and the power and impact that it can have. We all remember, though, the classics, right? We all remember the classics that fundamentally connected with our hearts, that connected with our moments, our memories, our childhood, or even our adulthood. We all remember those stories. So if you can create stories that have a similar impact on the people you're trying to reach, that is very, very powerful. And I strongly advise that you leverage the fact that if you go through a creation process like this and a distribution process like that, you will be able to get closer to creating content that shapes culture, and ultimately creating content that is worth getting close to that screen for, like we talked about earlier, right? So first, I want to recommend that you think about where you want to go. Second, dream about that destination, believe that you can get there, and finally, dare to press publish on those pieces of content that are within you that you have been holding back on creating, and be intentional of promoting it aggressively. And again, if you do that, you will create content engine that is worth getting close to the screen for. Thank you so much for listening. It's been great. I would love to jump into the chat and have some Q&A. If you have any questions, I'll be here for a bit. So let's jump in.
That was awesome, Ross. Thank you. Such great analogies. I feel like everyone's like, yeah, like woohoo, round of applause, Ross. You're so interesting and engaging. Let's jump right in here. Just because this is really fresh, and Nicole has 2 questions, so I'm just going to ask this one for everyone. Is it medium.com? Is that the site that you were talking about?
It is, yes, medium.com.
Okay, great. Nikki, I don't know if you want to ask that first question, because I don't know what it was relating to. Hopefully you can remember. It's a little tricky to hear you.
Do you see it somewhere? Because I can't see it and I can't remember.
Yeah. You said, is the article on your site? I don't know exactly what part you were referring to.
Oh, I think I meant like when you're talking about publishing an article, do you mean actually publishing it on my .com site?
That's correct. Yeah. So when you are creating the content, it would be publishing it on your actual site. So if you don't today have a blog section of your site, that's okay. But that's essentially what I'm talking about there. I do advise that you do set up some type of section where you can create content. One of the pieces of advice that I've been giving for years is, if you don't have a blog section created on your site today, that's okay. Take a step back. Don't get all excited after Ross gives a talk and say, I need to start blogging tomorrow. What I would advise you do is to actually take November and December and probably even January to actually just think about the titles of the pieces of content that you can create, actually have a nice glass of wine and write 2 or 3 pieces of content, and then start pressing publish come February. Because what oftentimes will happen is you get so fired up about, oh, I want to create content, that you get on a roll. Like tonight, you write a piece of content, you press publish, you don't get a lot of traction. And then you're like, oh, I'm defeated. I'm not going to keep going. What I advise is that you plan in advance some of the content that you can create. So when things do get busy in the middle of February, you already have a piece scheduled, a piece that's already in your mind. You know where you're going to go with it. You know what you're going to create. So you do want to have a section on your site to create content and to publish it. Another reason why is there are tons of studies and reports that show that companies that blog and people that create content generate more traffic and results than those that don't. And it's just fundamentally going back to that idea I talked about earlier, that content can shape culture. And if you create content consistently enough, you have an opportunity to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Nice to see you. Monique Burke, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. So I think you kind of talked about it a little bit, but my question was creating content. Like, how often should you be creating it in order to keep current?
Great question. So frequency is a big piece of like what a lot of folks ask. And I think it's an important question to ask, but the key piece of it is, how often can you individually create valuable content? And if you can create valuable content every single month, once, that's it. That's your answer, right? Like if that's how often you can create valuable content, then it's once a month. If you can do it every single day, then by all means, go for it. Like, you do your thing, but it's going to come down to your own personal situation. I think you don't want to put a time on, I need to create one piece every week. You don't want to do that. I always say, like, start small and then compound up to that as you start to get close to the systems, and as you get better at creating content. Like, it used to take me probably, I don't know, anywhere from 20 to 30 hours to write a good blog post. Now I can write a blog post in like 2 hours, maybe one if I have a glass of wine. But like, it's going to come down to your own like skill set and comfort level with your own creation process, etc., and what type of content you're also creating, right? Because to be honest, this is something that I also don't think people have realized. The easiest type of content to create is really video content. You pull up your camera, you talk into the camera for a second, you share it, or you record your voice on a phone and then you upload that as a podcast, and you do that every other day. So yeah, it all depends, but I would say as much as you can create, and it's okay. Like, be okay with the idea that for some people that's going to be once a month. For some people, it's going to be once a week. Be okay with that reality, because not everybody's living the same life.
Thanks, Monique. Great
Thank you.
question. Thank you. Let's keep going here. Florence, do you want to ask your question on screen?
Yeah, Ross, I think we could stay here for 2 hours, but I'm going to be mindful of everyone's time. So I actually just want to hear your thoughts and your personal thoughts on what you think are trending and buzzworthy, and like topics that are really hot at the moment, because I feel like you have the pulse. Yeah. And you have the insider information. But then my part 2 question is, what have you found are just the like the hierarchy topics that are just tried and true and are classic, meaning don't go out of style?
For sure. So great question. I think there's a lot here. So I'll start with a fundamental belief that there's 3 types of content that we should create as people. We should create content that does one of 3 things, and it's called the 3 E's. Content that educates people, content that engages people, or content that entertains people. If you create content that does one of those 3 things, you're creating a piece of content that is actually worth creating. If when you are about to press publish on a piece of content and it's a picture of a mug or a Starbucks cup, if it doesn't do any of those 3 things, you probably shouldn't press publish. So engage, educate, or entertain. That is what you first have to understand about the type of content you're putting out there. Now, in terms of topics, pop culture is always going to be something that is resonating with folks. We as humans have been interested in pop culture since the beginning of time. So if you can find ways to tie yourself to pop culture, that content typically resonates. T Swift, Kim K, like those topics always generate engagement. I've written blog posts. I'm kind of aging myself on this one, but I wrote a blog post and it was like 10 blog post ideas that are always going to work. And it got so much love on social media because I took a pop cultural twist and added it to something that is in the wonderful world of B2B and marketing, and the internet ate it up. They loved it. I also created a piece about like 10 lessons that you could learn about the come up of Drake. This was like 10, 15 years ago, and how it can be applied to marketing. People loved it. People ate it up. Pop culture always resonates with folks, especially if you can apply it to your industry. But to go to like a more fundamental, like new worlds, self-care content, it's hotter than ever. Content that helps people be better, content that leaves people feeling inspired. That type of content is definitely on the uptick. Wellness related content, mindfulness related content, all of those types of pieces, especially with people working more and more remotely. People are feeling like they need that human connection. So anything that inspires and provides that type of insight around how to feel connected is taking off and resonating with folks. And then there's silly things like memes. So if you want to stay on top of the pulse, like whatever the latest meme is, you write a piece about that meme and it generates engagement and traction too. And then I don't go into this world, but politics always generates engagement too.
Oh, I'll stay away from that. No,
yeah.
thanks. No, thanks. Awesome. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Florence. And that was super helpful, Ross. We have one, I don't know if Elizabeth is still there. I don't see her on camera, but she asked, do you rename the content? And I don't know exactly what she was referring to, but I'm sure you do, Ross.
So I think I do. So you do want to rename the content. So if you create a piece of content and it's going out of date, if it's going out of style, whatever, you want to rename it. So even that post that I wrote about the blog post titles that are going to work, it's not called that anymore. It was called that when that song was hot. Now it's called 5 engaging blog post titles that every marketer should use, or whatever it is, right? Like it has a completely different title now because it's still not that relevant. So you do want to update your titles and keep them up to date with the times and adjust dates, etc.
Did that help answer your question, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just find it hard when
Oh, we lost you there. We lost you.
I find it difficult when I find a couple of articles that are similar and just reworked. So yeah, that's my personal bias, but I can see how people kind of will flit around and not go in deep on,
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Elizabeth. I don't think I missed anything other than Monique's really cute. I liked Lion King 1.5 though. Sorry, I also didn't watch it, so there you go. To Ross's point, but I'm sure it was decent. Listen, I loved all the Disney references, and your analogies were super helpful, Ross. I feel like I think I say this every workshop because everyone's so engaging, and I feel like an hour sometimes isn't enough, but I feel like this is part 1 of a 2-parter that we might do in the spring, if you're cool with that, because I feel like we just scratch the surface now, and we need to get into your brain a little bit further.
If you folks wanted to do a Q&A fireside chat, I could chat this stuff for hours, and if you wanted to send questions or have a dialogue like this, that would be awesome. Like I said, I'm a geek. I dream and sleep this stuff, so happy to join.
Okay, cool. That would be great. Well, everyone stay tuned for that. For 2021, we'll have Ross back on for a little fireside chat, and hopefully we can dive even deeper. But thank you so much for being here, Ross. That was awesome. Can you let everyone know one more time where they can find you online?
Yeah, so do a quick search, Ross Simmonds, through the Googles, but also I'm most active on LinkedIn, but I'm on every platform. So whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, if you're there, I'm there. Unless you're on TikTok. I'm not there yet, but I'm planning to, maybe. No, I don't know. My knees don't work like they used to, so I probably won't be dancing on there anytime soon.
You gotta dance, Ross.
I know. I can dance. I just don't know if I'm doing it on TikTok yet. Any of the platforms, I'm definitely happy to connect with you folks. LinkedIn for sure. If you're on there, be sure to give me a connection request, and just let me know that you're coming from this, so I know. My LinkedIn requests are a hot mess, so I would love to connect.
Well, that is awesome, and thank you again so much. We hope the East Coast is going to treat you well, and everyone stay healthy out there. Thank you again to our exclusive bank partner, CIBC, for powering this webinar. And a big thank you again to Ross for spending your Thursday evening with us.
No worries, Dan. Thanks you and Sam for having me. I really love the work that you two have been doing with this. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you guys so much for joining, and hope you all enjoyed it. And I'll be on for another few minutes if anyone wants to chat about anything.
Awesome.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Ross.